In this example we're going to be quickly looking at how we can use Photoshop to produce slightly more comprehensive mood boards, in particular looking at using something called layer masks, which allows you to mask out areas and reveal others using a grayscale alpha channel. So we're looking for Adobe Photoshop, which on the college computers is Master Collection CS6, and then we'll go with Photoshop CS6 64-bit. Okay, I've prepared a folder with some images that I want to use in my scene, so I decided that my theme is going to be kind of polar theme, so lots of cold scenes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an A3 document. I want it to be A3 landscape. So I'm going to create new on File menu. I'll look for international paper and choose A3, and then what I'll do is I'll change the dimensions from 297 width to 420 by 297, and I'll save this as a preset if I haven't done so already, and I'll call that A3 landscape. Okay, so then I can reuse that preset because it will show up here. Then I click OK, and that is our page. What we're going to use is a method called placing, and this is where you put a file inside of a file, and it's linked. So let's just have a quick look at that first. So I'm going to place my background image, which is a Northern Lights photograph. All of these images have been acquired through Google search, looking for Creative Commons images. Although a mood board essentially is an internal piece and won't really be published. So what we've got here is, if I double click on that layer, it will allow me to open the file. This is where it's a linked file. So if I was to make some changes to this file and then save them, they would be reflected in this image. An example would be just draw some white over, but obviously I don't really want to save those changes to this image, so I'm just going to close it down and not commit those changes. So this means it's a non-destructive process to a certain extent, unless we rasterize those files so they're part of this committed. So I'm going to delete the background there, as I don't need it anymore, and then I'm going to place another image from my selection. So I'll choose the polar bear, and then when you bring it in, it gives you the option to resize it before you do anything. If you hold shift, you'll constrain the proportions. That's keeping the sizes on the length and height proportionate to each other, as opposed to squashing or anything like that. So I'll make it slightly bigger, and then I double click to commit the changes. And you'll notice again, now that this is a layer added above the background, and it's also a linked file. Okay, so we could, if we wanted to, use any number of method of highlighting, and we could also paint over this image, but what I want to do is I want to make its background disappear so that the main subject appears to be part of this mood board. So it makes a little bit more of a cohesive scene, and it also means that some of the visual information I'm not interested in maybe perhaps doesn't show up. So what I'll do is I'll zoom in a little bit, Control and plus, which you can do with the magnifying glass tool as well. You zoom in, or hold Alt to zoom out. Unfortunately that doesn't work with this recording software, so I'll just have to zoom out with Control and minus at this point. But trust me, when you hold Alt and press the left mouse button, it will zoom out. I can use the hand tool here to move around once I'm zoomed in. And what I want to do is I want to create a layer mask, and that is found at the bottom of the screen. There we go. Yeah. So I've got the layer selected, it's highlighted blue. The layer mask is this button here, add layer mask. I click on that, and what it does is it creates another thumbnail. So I've got the layer thumbnail, which is the image we see, and then I've got the layer mask thumbnail, and this is essentially what is visible and what's not visible. When it's empty, everything's visible, and this works on a grayscale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a brush and illustrate that. So if I've got a black brush and I set the flow of the brush to 100%, so it's a hard brush, which I can find out about in brushes presets. So brush properties, get a pretty hard brush. Then with the layer mask selected, I get that because there's a box around in it, I can delete, well, remove areas of that image from view. And if I was to change the colour back to white, either by clicking this button here, switching from foreground to background, or using X, you'll notice that I can just paint back in detail. In addition to that, because this works on a grayscale of 255 gradations from white to black, if I choose a colour that is, say, in the middle, you will notice that I can see some of the background and some of the foreground at the same time. So the best way to do that is to do the edge of the bear there. And obviously the closer to white it is, the less transparent it is, like so. Okay, so we're going to use that technique to remove the background of this image, or at least hide it away in a less destructive way. Now also another way I can do this is to use the black brush and have it on flow. If I change the flow to a lower amount, it will act as though it's a greyer colour to start off with, but it will build up to black, just more slowly. So that's quite useful for just doing fine edges. But for doing large areas, I want the flow to be around 100% to start off with. And zoom up a little bit. I want to use a bigger brush. Now I can get a bigger brush using the square bracket keys, or by using the brush settings here, which is the size. Brush off. And the bigger the brush is, the more information I can remove at a given time. So it's best to start off zoom quite far out and get rid of large areas of information quickly, like so. Try to get as close as you can without really going over the edges. Okay, and then a smaller brush and zoom further in to get the additional information. And going quite close, not necessarily actually going over the edges, because we can go over this again. And you don't need to be too precious, and this is for a mood board, so all we're really trying to do is to clean it up relatively quickly. Okay. So I'll get quite close to the edge. I'll use the scroll wheel to scroll down there. I mean, there was part of an image that was a shadow as well. quite useful. So just think of this as a slightly easier way of using a marquee to draw around something. There we go. So it's relatively neat and tidy. I'll take this bit out as well, perhaps. And now, make the brush smaller there. Okay, what I'm going to do is look for a brush that's got a little bit of a softer edge. You know, for working close to the edges. I'm going to change the flare down to somewhere in the region of maybe 10%. Make the brush a little bit bigger and just feather over the edges. There's another way we can achieve this as well. I'm going to go a bit closer in. Just go over the edges as best you can. Get rid of especially the brightest bits that stand out. Try to get rid of any sharp edges as well. Okay, what I can also do then is use the blur tool, which is something that looks like a teardrop. And in the layer mask mode, what it does, it just blurs the mask itself and the edges of the mask. But it can still be used to soften up the effects in the same way that it will create softer tones around the edges. And therefore that should soften off the overall effect. There we go. That'll do for now. And I can just reposition that layer by reselecting it and moving it wherever I feel I need to put it. So for example, there. And you just repeat that for a few different objects that you're going to put into your mood board, and it'll start to look a little bit more professional.